I'm Beverly O'Connor. Coming up, the Suez Canal reopens after salvage teams finally free a colossal container ship. Injured and desperate Myanmar's ethnic Karen people flee their homes after being bombed by the military. And how a grassroots movement is taking on the world's richest man and Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. Well, the Suez Canal is once again open for business after salvage crews refloated an enormous cargo ship. The mission to clear the canal began after the Ever Given ran aground in high winds and a sandstorm. After nearly a week, a breakthrough came when the ship's bow was pulled free by a flotilla of tugboats, as Talia Olatia reports.
Praise to God and a thumbs up. Cheers erupted and horns sounded as the massive cargo ship Ever Given, which has been diagonally stuck in the Suez Canal for nearly a week, was partially refloated. The breakthrough came at just over 5:30 a.m. Egypt time as a flotilla of tugboats was used to push and pull the 200,000-tonne vessel, compelling it to straighten up. The head of the Suez Canal Authority said the 400-metre ship was now 80% in the right direction, with the ship's bulbous bow forcibly pulled from the canal's eastern bank. Crews have been working around the clock to free the colossal container ship that's been causing headaches since it ran aground last week. The Suez Canal is the shortest and fastest shipping lane between Asia and Europe, with more than 12% of global trade using the route. More than 350 ships carrying everything from crude oil to cattle were caught up in the traffic jam as the Ever Given blocked transit in both directions. Talia Olatia, ABC News.
Well, as protests continue in cities across Myanmar, there's also a flashpoint on the border with Thailand. Thousands of people have been trying to flee from the southeast Karen state because of fighting between the military and ethnic armed groups. Thailand's Prime Minister has promised refugees they will be allowed to cross the border if violence escalates. But some people say they have already been turned back. Southeast Asia correspondent Mazoe Ford.
After being turned back by Thai border authorities twice, a boat carrying injured ethnic Karen people from Myanmar is finally allowed to dock. Thai medics rush to help and bring each of the refugees to a local hospital. Some have suffered terrible burns, others have head injuries and large bruises, all the result of their villages being attacked by Myanmar's army over the weekend.
I can still hear the airstrike. I heard aircraft and an airstrike and I can't sleep at night.
I haven't eaten anything for 2 days. There was also bleeding from my head.
Thousands of ethnic Karen people have fled across the border into jungle on the Thailand side. Some sent video to aid groups showing Thai border guards ordering them back, but the government claims they returned voluntarily.
We asked them if they had any problem in their area. When they said no problem, we just asked them to go back. We didn't point guns in their faces. We shook their hands and even wished them well.
Most of the Karen refugees are now back in Myanmar, but with more airstrikes reported in their villages, they're staying put in the jungle for now.
If the tension rises, the province will set up an ad hoc centre to assist those seeking refuge from the unrest in Myanmar.
The armed wing of the Karen National Union claims the military is advancing on all fronts and it will defend its territory. A warning that more conflict is coming and Thailand may soon see the trickle of refugees become a flood. Mazoe Ford, ABC News.
The trial of the former Minneapolis police officer charged with killing George Floyd is underway. On the first day, prosecutors showed video of Mr. Floyd gasping for breath as the officer pressed his knee into the 46-year-old black man's neck. And just a warning, North America Bureau Chief Greg Jennett's story does contain confronting images.
Mostly in silence and on bended knee, a murder case morphed into a moment of faith.
We need to pray that America can live up to its high ideals. Say his name! George Floyd! Say his name! George Floyd!
Family and lawyers entered the fortified courthouse to face off against defendant Derek Chauvin to see his arrest of George Floyd in trial by video.
The most important numbers you will hear in this trial are 929. What happened in those 9 minutes and 29 seconds when Mr. Derek Chauvin was applying this excessive force to the body of Mr. George Floyd.
The prosecution case is simple enough that former officer Chauvin dishonoured his badge and strayed outside the law.
We plan to prove to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Mr. Chauvin was anything other than innocent for engaging in behavior that was imminently dangerous.
Okay, breathe.
Stop moving.
Mama.
Derek Chauvin did exactly what he had been trained to do.
His defence will trawl over Mr. Floyd's past, a record of drug use, police arrests and a medical history of poor heart health, advanced as a possible cause of death rather than choking.
All of which acted to further compromise an already compromised heart.
Derek Chauvin's lawyers recognise theirs is a tough argument to win, which is why they're asking jurors to dwell on any holes that might arise in the case against him. It's a technical appeal to reason inside the court, weighed against a more momentous framing of this case outside.
Make no mistake about it. Chauvin is in the courtroom, but America's on trial.
The nation could get its verdict late next month. Greg Jennett, ABC News, Washington.
A massive fire and explosion at an oil refinery in Indonesia has forced hundreds of people to flee their homes. No one was killed in the blaze, but several were injured, as Andrea Niehoff reports.
Plumes of smoke reach into the sky over Indonesia's West Java province as the Pertamina Balongan refinery is swallowed by flames. Many people who were passing by at the time are now in hospital with burns, but Pertamina says none of its staff from inside the plant were injured. Just after midnight, nearby residents were shaken awake by the force of the explosion and left to deal with the damage.
It was shaky like an earthquake. I was surprised. I was asleep at the time.
Almost 1,000 people told to head to nearby evacuation centres. While the cause of the explosion isn't yet known, lightning and heavy rain were reported at the time. One resident telling a TV station she smelt fuel, and then suddenly the sky was orange. In the daylight, the state-owned facility, which produces around 125,000 barrels per day, was still alight. Pertamina says its fuel stocks are secure, but it could take days to resume operations. Andrea Niehoff, ABC News.
Papua New Guinea's vaccine rollout is underway, but the country is still facing a COVID crisis. The health system is under enormous strain. Daily cases are rising and the vaccination drive is facing resistance. Our PNG correspondent Natalie Whiting is in Port Moresby.
A sports centre with no athletes. As COVID-19 cases surge in PNG, it's been converted into a field hospital. But it needs more staff.
We have one doctor per 14,000 people. That's our doctor-to-patient ratio. We're in a perpetual state of disaster.
This centre is only set up to treat mild and moderate cases. But there's a shortage of critical beds at the city's main hospital.
Last night there were 3 resuscitations happening at the same time. Unfortunately, all the resuscitations were unsuccessful.
A second field hospital has just opened and medical teams will soon arrive from overseas.
Frontline health workers are stretched to the limit. They are in the burnout.
Another Australian Air Force plane full of vaccination supplies has arrived, but there are concerns many people don't want the jab.
What we want is we want all our staff to be vaccinated.
Full vaccination on Monday. Discussions have been held with staff at the Port Moresby General Hospital about the benefits of being vaccinated. So far, about 40% have agreed to it. This stadium has been set up to deliver the 8,000 vaccines that Australia has donated for frontline medical workers. But there are concerns about future supplies. A shipment expected from India may be delayed because it needs the vaccines for domestic use. Australia has indicated it may supply more doses. It's now facing pressure to commit to that. Natalie Whiting, ABC News, Port Moresby.
The Australian government says it is not satisfied with a long-awaited report into the origins of the coronavirus pandemic. Investigators from the World Health Organization and China found the virus was most likely transmitted from bats. But questions remain, especially for the loved ones of the more than 2.8 million people who have died around the world. Here's Europe correspondent Nick Dole in London.
Like much of the world, the UK has got used to grim statistics, but behind each of these 150,000 love hearts was a life with a family left behind. Fran Hall's husband Steve died last October, just 3 weeks after their wedding.
And he became ill the day after we got married and was taken to hospital a week later, and sadly they just couldn't save him. But I was really lucky. I was able to be with him when he died.
Victims' families want answers about how the virus started and what was done to stop it. Earlier this year, the World Health Organization sent a team to Wuhan to investigate the possible origins of the pandemic. The joint WHO-China study has now been published and concludes the virus was probably transmitted from bats to humans via another animal. A lab leak was found to be extremely unlikely, but nothing has been ruled out completely.
We've left it on the table, and if more evidence comes forward, fine, it needs to be followed up.
In a joint statement, Australia and more than a dozen other countries voiced their shared concerns that the study was significantly delayed and lacked access to complete original data and samples. They want a second phase investigation by experts that's free from interference. It's hard to grasp just how many lives have been destroyed by this pandemic. Of course, the death toll is just part of the story. While the international community is still struggling to contain this outbreak, there are doubts about its ability to contain the next.
Global tech giant Amazon is facing an uprising in Alabama where workers are trying to unionise. As Sarah Ferguson reports, other tech giants are now on notice.
Birmingham, Alabama, with its decayed and rusting industrial heritage, is a city with a hard past.
Birmingham, the nation's most segregated big city.
A city whose very name conjures images of racial repression.
Dynamite exploded on a Sunday morning, killed 4 little girls in Sunday school.
60 years later, and Birmingham is ground zero for another bitter struggle, this time pitching the richest man in the world against some of his poorest black workers, trying to unionise at one of his biggest warehouses. And the new president has chosen sides.
Unions put power in the hands of workers. They level the playing field.
Today and over the next few days and weeks, workers in Alabama are voting on whether to organize a union in their workplace. This is vitally important.
This election transcends Alabama. It even transcends Amazon. It's about what the future of work is going to look like.
Black Lives Matter activists have got behind the campaign, and they care little for billionaire Jeff Bezos' reputation as the country's most prolific job creator.
So were slave masters. They were job creators. Slave masters were job creators, but the slaves created the wealth.
We're going to send a clear message to Amazon all across the world that it's about us, now is our time, and we will have a union. And with that being said...
Right now we're dealing with a group of people, a generation, who's not going to settle for what you just give them.
They need a union, first of all, because of the wages. The work that you do not match the wages.
We have very good communications with our employees, so we don't believe that we need a union to be an intermediary between us and our employees. But of course, at the end of the day, it's always the employee's choice.
You will learn about the warning signs most commonly associated with early union organizing.
While Bezos talks about employees' choice, his avatar gives Amazon workers a lesson in union busting.
It is critical that we recognize the early warning signs of potential organizing and escalate concerns promptly.
Have you ever wondered how Amazon gets your packages to you so quickly? Lisa cruises the aisles to get your stuff. Oh, you make this look easy.
Missing from Amazon's propaganda is the astonishingly high turnover of workers, up to 100% a year, in these Orwellian-titled fulfillment centres.
You know, you see the commercials and you see the pictures, but to actually be there, a lot of people not with that. You know, it's a slave camp.
Slave camp or fulfillment centre. Each side has its own description for the 82,000 square metre warehouse, employing 5,800 people.
They brag about that $15 an hour. I was making that in 2008. This 2020, 21, and you starting people off in a trillion-dollar company, a multi-trillion-dollar company, paying them $15 an hour.
The workforce is made up of black and brown people, roughly almost 80%. So we talking about a group of people, a workforce, who has been oppressed forever.
You guys, I think we're going to get started very shortly.
Saturday morning, under the giant crab at Juicy Seafoods in Bessemer, local activist Jason Kabilas addresses volunteers.
So basically what we're doing out is going to these communities today, getting signatures on petitions or videos of people for social media.
Much of the workforce comes from these poor neighbourhoods around Birmingham. On a street corner in Brighton, Jason runs into La Crystal.
We're just going door to door, talking to the community.
Who recently quit her Amazon job.
Hi, my name is La Crystal Smith. I am a supporter of the union.
La Crystal was part of Amazon's huge turnover of workers.
Coming from someone that has worked in the coal mine, it's certain things you just will not tolerate. Like,
you worked in a coal mine?
Yes, ma'am. I am a certified coal miner. 2,200 feet underground. We all know the body doesn't flow without a break. We need nutrition. We need all of that. I'm not a robot. I operate the robots.
In a 10-hour shift on their feet, workers like La Crystal get 2 15-minute breaks and 30 minutes for a meal. Any other break is recorded by AI machines as time off task.
There are thousands of robot drive units spread throughout each floor, helping associates fulfill customer orders daily.
What happened if you took a break that was too long?
If you're not back at that station at that time, point system. So after so many points are accumulated, termination.
In Washington, key Democrats see the Amazon campaign as a critical test case.
This hasn't been covered enough, Sarah. Go watch Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times movie. Remember him being sucked into the machines and like the dehumanization of work. Okay, well now it's 2021. And what does a human workplace mean in our era? Amazon workers at that facility are supposed to touch a package every 8 seconds. They are monitored by geopositioning, by video camera, by audio device, every second. And if they take too many minutes off task, whatever that means, in a shift, they're fired. And there may not even be a human being involved in the process.
On the other side of Birmingham, a very different neighbourhood. New cars in the driveways of new homes. Here we found college-educated Lavanette and William Stokes, proudly wearing their Amazon T-shirts. Do you like being part of the Amazon family?
I love it. I love it because I see the opportunities.
Before the pandemic hit their jobs, Lavanette worked in education. William ran a restaurant. They took jobs at Amazon doing all-night 10-hour shifts on their feet. Both opposed the union.
I just know I'm 52 years old, and I haven't had a day where I said, oh, I just can't go back. It's something that you have to get conditioned to.
I think it's this, the picture they have painted of Amazon is this big monster. Everybody want to slay the monster. You know, Jeff is a billionaire. He has all this money. Oh my God, he could pay Amazon workers $30 an hour to pack a box.
Zuckerberg and the Bezos are not wizards who possess some privileged place.
There's politics in this fight. Joe Biden is desperate to win back the blue-collar workers seduced by Donald Trump. Whoever wins the vote in Alabama, big tech companies like Amazon are on notice. They may be the future of work, but there's going to be a fight about how that looks.
Regardless of the outcome with this situation in Bama, Amazon, the labor movement is alive and well right now. This fight is alive, and it's alive around the world. People have been noticed, their eyes have been opened, and they're ready to fight.
Sarah Ferguson with that story. Now let's return to Myanmar, where doctors and nurses are risking their lives by volunteering to treat wounded anti-coup protesters in secret medical clinics. The military has violently cracked down on demonstrators, killing more than 500 people since seizing power last month. Most public hospitals are closed, so these pop-up medical services have become a lifeline. And just a warning, Southeast Asia correspondent Zoe Ford's report does contain distressing video.
During the military junta's violent crackdown, Myanmar's doctors and nurses have been busier than ever. Most are on strike from public hospital jobs as part of the civil disobedience movement and are instead volunteering to treat injured anti-coup protesters. We're protecting their identity out of concern for their safety.
On the day when the protesters started to have injuries, we doctors and nurses cried our eyes out. I can't describe it.
It's dangerous work. To avoid being caught by police, the volunteer medics are running mobile clinics and secret triage zones in back alleys and private buildings.
If they saw us, they would arrest us. We secretly provide treatment, knowing it's unsafe, so we stay undercover.
And this is why 3 helpless paramedics were beaten by police earlier this month. The shocking video went viral.
I feel really sad. We should all live peacefully, but people have to run, shed blood, and lives have been at stake.
Most of the injured demonstrators are still teenagers.
I'm not scared of these wounds. I'll be on the streets as soon as I feel better.
The youth deserve praise. They neither cried nor felt terrified upon seeing blood coming out of their wounds. It seems like they have strong minds and don't feel the pain.
Even with the death toll rising by the day, Myanmar's protesters say they'll continue their fight for democracy at any cost. Zoe Ford, ABC News.
In Mexico, there's growing outrage over the death of a Salvadoran woman in police custody. An autopsy concluded the 36-year-old died from a broken neck, and a video has emerged of an officer kneeling on her back. And again, Talia Olatia's story does contain distressing images.
Another distressing video. This time it's 4 Mexican police officers accused of killing Victoria Salazar Arriaza, a Salvadoran woman in the town of Tulum. The police have not confirmed why the 36-year-old was being restrained, but an autopsy confirmed Ms. Salazar died after police knelt on her back and broke her neck.
The police technique of body control that was applied and the level of force used was disproportionate, immoderate and with a high risk to life.
3 male officers and 1 female officer have been charged in connection with her death. Tulum's police chief has been fired, and as Mexico hosts a United Nations summit focused on gender equality, the president has vowed there will be no impunity.
She was brutally treated and murdered. It's a situation that fills us with sadness, pain and shame, and a message to her relatives and all men and women around the world. Those responsible will be punished. They're already in the process of being prosecuted.
Ms. Salazar, a refugee from El Salvador, had been living in Mexico on a humanitarian visa. The Salvadoran president, Nayib Bukele, took to Twitter, "All we ask for is justice," urging Mexico to apply the full force of the law. Ms. Salazar's mother has echoed those calls.
I need it. I know that my daughter will never come back to life, but I would be more than satisfied if these men were punished.
Out on the streets, people are remembering Victoria.
The reality is that we don't believe that the government on its own will resolve the problem of violence against women. It is important that women organise and mobilise to fight for our right to bring an end to this systemic violence.
Talia Olatia, ABC News.
Well, Japan's cherry blossoms have reached their flowery peak earlier this year than at any time since formal records began. The nation's favourite flower, called sakura, used to reach peak bloom in April, just as the country celebrated the start of its new school and business year.
Spring has sprung in Japan, at least according to its cherry blossom trees. The blooms, called sakura in Japanese, showering the streets with pale pink petals and enticing visitors of all shapes and sizes to try and get the perfect picture.
When I was a high school student, I think cherry blossoms were still blooming around April. I think the timing for full bloom is getting earlier.
In fact, it could be the earliest flowering peak since 1409, according to data analysed by Osaka University. The 2021 season peaking in Kyoto on March 26 and setting similar records in other cities. Many attributing it to changing environmental conditions.
I believe that half of the acceleration is due to global warming occurring on the larger scale, and the other half is due to urban warming at Kyoto.
The premature peak coming after more than a year of change due to the coronavirus pandemic. The Japanese government is asking people not to hold their traditional picnics and other gatherings under the trees, though not everyone is listening.
Many people are here to see the cherry blossoms because the news reported yesterday that the flowers would be in full bloom today.
Seeing this symbol of life, death and rebirth close up, too good an opportunity to miss. Andrea Niehoff, ABC News.
And that is the program. More world news and interviews can be found at the ABC YouTube channel. And do join me on The World weeknights on the ABC's News channel. I'm Bev O'Connor. Thanks for your company. Bye-bye.